Welcome to a new edition of Mystic Skeptic Radio show and podcast. Today we are delving into the rise of anti-Semitism. We did a show 2 weeks ago in which we discussed Jon Stewart and the problem with journalism, but we posted on our Raiders of the Unknown YouTube channel our investigation on Alex Jones, even before the Kanye West story became prevalent. So I'm going to read an article from The Guardian regarding Kanye West's suspension from Twitter. And the reason that I'm rehashing this problem is because it has become a painful reminder of how easily conspiracies spread and how someone famous with a platform can really cause a lot of harm. So this is the description of the article by Dan Milmo, again from The Guardian. Elon Musk intervenes after rapper posted image hours after airing anti-Semitic views in Alex Jones' interview. Ye, the rapper formerly known as Kanye West, has been suspended from Twitter after he tweeted an image of a swastika blended with the Star of David, less than 2 weeks after he returned to the platform. The suspension took place hours after Ye praised Adolf Hitler and the Nazis in an interview on InfoWars, a show hosted by the right-wing conspiracy theorist Alex Jones. Ye was one of the several high-profile Twitter users whose accounts were banned or restricted on the site, who then had them reinstated after Elon Musk took over as an owner. Ye's account was unlocked on November 21st, having previously been restricted for tweeting anti-Semitic message. Musk tweeted, "I tried my best. Despite that, he again violated a rule against incitement to violence. Account will be suspended." Musk has previously described his approach to content moderation as, quote, "if in doubt, let the speech exist," end quote, as well as reinstating Donald Trump's account. Musk has declared a, quote, "general amnesty," end quote, for previously suspended accounts. Musk did not clarify whether Ye's suspension would be permanent. On Thursday night, Ye shared the image of swastika over the Star of David, a symbol of Judaism. The tweet was swiftly deleted. Also on Thursday, it was announced that Ye was no longer buying Parler, the right-wing social media network. Parler said the decision was made in the interest of both parties. Quote, "let's always remember this as my final tweet," end quote, Ye wrote, posting an unflattering image of Musk half-naked on a yacht. Quote, "that's fine," end quote, Musk replied. "This is not," he wrote on the deleted swastika tweet. The rapper then began posting on Truth Social, the social media platform started by Trump, sharing text messages purportedly from Musk, in which the billionaire appeared to attempt to reason with him about the tweet. Quote, "sorry, but you have gone too far. This is not love," end quote, Musk wrote. Quote, "who made you the judge?" end quote, Ye replied. He then shared a screenshot of his Twitter account showing that he had been banned from tweeting for 12 hours, violating the platform's rules. Shielded behind a face mask, he appeared alongside the white supremacist Nick Fuentes on InfoWars in an episode posted online on Thursday. The rapper said, quote, "I see good things about Hitler. Every human being has something of value that they brought to the table, especially Hitler," end quote. Jones replied, "the Nazis were thugs," end quote. Quote, "but they did good things too," Ye said. "We got to stop dissing the Nazis all the time." "Oh my goodness, just because you don't like one group, that doesn't mean," Jones said. Clearly uncomfortable, he interrupted, "I love Jewish people, but I also love Nazis." "I don't think Hitler was a good guy," Jones stated later. Ye replied, "there's a lot of things that I love about Hitler, a lot of things," end quote. Norm Coleman and Matt Brooks, leaders of the Republican Jewish Coalition, condemned Ye's comments, saying, quote, "giving his praise of Hitler, it can be overstated that Kanye West is a vile, repellent bigot who has targeted the Jewish community with threats and Nazi-style defamation. Conservatives have mistakenly indulged Kanye West must make it clear that he's a pariah. Enough is enough." End quote. On Friday, Joe Biden used Twitter to express fresh condemnation of anti-Semitism and political leaders that tolerate it, passively or otherwise. Quote, "I just want to make a few things clear. The Holocaust happened, Hitler was a demonic figure, and instead of giving it a platform, a political leader should be calling out and rejecting anti-Semitism wherever it hides. Silence is complicity." End quote, Biden tweeted. Jonathan Greenblatt, CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, echoed similar sentiments on Friday. In an interview with CNN, Greenblatt said, quote, "Anti-Semitism has been described as the oldest hatred. It existed before Kanye, and it will persist long after Kanye. Yet there is no question that when one of the most well-known entertainers on the planet tries to somehow sanitize Adolf Hitler, suggests that Jews are behind the conspiracies to keep him down, to keep black people down, and then again tweets out this image of a Jewish star with the swastika, it can literally incite people to violence." End quote, he said. After Yee's interview aired, a Twitter account run by Republicans in U.S. Congress deleted a tweet that had seemingly expressed support for Yee. Musk, a self-declared, quote, "free speech absolutist," end quote, came under pressure from the European Union over content moderation standards this week when the Internal Market Commissioner, Thierry Breton, warned that the platform must significantly increase efforts to comply with new online legislation. The EU's Digital Services Act requires tech firms to tackle problems including abusive posts and disinformation. Since Musk took over Twitter in October, hate speech has proliferated significantly across the social media platform. On Friday, the New York Times reported new findings from the Center for Countering Digital Hate, the Anti-Defamation League, and other organizations that monitor social media. According to the findings, within 2 weeks of Musk's takeover, anti-Semitic posts increased by more than 61%. Additionally, before the takeover, hate speech against gay men appeared an average of 2,506 times a day. However, after Musk bought the company, homophobic slurs jumped to 3,964 times a day. Similarly, slurs against black Americans appeared a daily average of 1,282 times before Musk purchased Twitter. However, after this takeover, hate speech jumped to an average of 3,876 times a day. So that's the article from The Guardian. According to Canary Mission, a Jewish organization that tracks hate, the article, "Question for Kanye, Why the Jews?" On October 25th, Adidas, the German company whose founders were members of the Nazi Party, formally dropped Kanye West due to his prolific spewing of anti-Semitism. The move, which is predicted to cost the company 4 to 8% of its earnings, will cost the rapper $1.5 billion. Other companies dropped the artist, including Gap, which deactivated Yeezy's Gap.com website that sold Kanye's collection, MRC Entertainment, which shelved its already made documentary of Kanye and issued a scathing statement worth reading, French fashion house Balenciaga, Vogue magazine, and Kanye's own agency CAA. After his initial anti-Semitic outburst on Instagram and Twitter, Kanye West made a telling remark that went largely unnoticed. Quote, "Do you think that comment came from just out of the blue?" The billionaire rapper asked a photographer who was questioning him about his anti-Semitic post. Indeed, now weeks long into Kanye's anti-Jewish tirade, the question is strikingly relevant. At first, many were willing to give Kanye a pass, or at least suspend judgment on his promise to go DEFCON 3 on Jewish people. Quote, "If you're an honest person, when you read this tweet, you had no idea what the hell he was talking about." End quote. Opinion Candace Owens. Quote, "Did he mean DEFCON 3, which would be a military defense position? Not an offense." End quote. Others chalked it up to his bipolar disorder, citing the fact that psychosis often comes with the disease. But those who were paying attention noticed Kanye West's remarks came just after an interview he gave with Tucker Carlson. There, Kanye accused Jared Kushner of engineering the Abraham Accords to line his wallet. Kushner, the chief architect of historic accords between Israel and a number of Arab nations, is Jewish. Since then, Kanye has spelled out his feelings about Jews and Zionists. Quite clearly, he invoked the most classic conspiracy theories about Jews, leaving us no questions about his anti-Semitism. Jewish people represent just 2% of America's population, yet they bear the brunt of more than 50% of all religious bias, hate crimes in the country. The most common conspiracy theories also involve Jews. Is not a coincidence. The assailants in the most deadly attacks against Jews in recent years were all deeply invested in anti-Jewish conspiracy theories. Robert Bowers, the Tree of Life synagogue shooter, communicated with white supremacist groups who deny the Holocaust. The same for the Poway synagogue shooter. One of the assailants who attacked the Jewish market in New Jersey posted Black Hebrew Israelites conspiracy theories. Black Hebrew Israelites claim they are the true Jews. The other Jews are imposters sent by the devil. The hostage taker at the synagogue in Colleyville, Texas, spewed voluminous venom against the Jews. He accused Jews of being behind 9/11, among other conspiracy theories. He specifically chose the synagogue as his target because he thought Jews were so powerful that they could pull the strings to free Al-Qaeda operative Afia Siddiqui from a nearby Fort Worth prison. Kanye West's rants tapped into the most classic conspiracy theory about Jews. Jews are secretly in control, manipulating industry, media, and governments to fit the global agenda. Kanye also positioned himself as a Jew and, as such, declared himself immune to accusations of anti-Semitism. In his DEFCON 3 on Jewish people tweet, Kanye informed us it was not anti-Semitic of him to say this because black people are actually Jew also. Further explanation came from the segment of the Tucker Carlson interview that was not aired, but leaked to the public by Vice online magazine Motherboard. There, Kanye said a Jew is one of the 12 lost tribes of Judah, the blood of Christ, who the people known as the race black really are. While the claim that Jews are the usurpers of the identity and birthright of blacks is more of a recent anti-Semitic trope, it follows a classic pattern of conspiracy theories, as noted by British comedian and author David Baddiel, writing years earlier in The Guardian, quote, "The conspiracy theories see himself as the good guy, the lone hero, unmasking the secret power of evil, even if unmasking the secret power of evil in so many cases seems to involve saying it is the Jews," end quote. Baddiel also explained how Kanye and so many others before him can deny accusations of anti-Semitism. Quote, "So we come to a position whereby, for a lot of people, pointing at one small ethnic group and saying they're responsible for all the worst things in the world is no longer racist, it's fighting the good fight," end quote. Dan Casino, a professor of Farley Dickinson University in New Jersey, commissioned a poll 4 months after the massacre of 20 children and 6 teachers at the Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newton, Connecticut. The poll found that 25% of Americans believe facts about the shooting were hidden by the government or media. Another 11% were unsure. One of the most popular conspiracy theories blamed Israeli death squads for the murders. Similarly, after the bombing of the Boston Marathon, conspiracy theories abounded, accusing Jews and Israelis of being behind the terror attack. Casino says Jewish conspiracy theories proliferate today for the same basic reason as they did historically. Quote, "There is a perception of Jews as the other, a part of society but still somehow foreign. Couple that with the resentment over Jewish success in certain areas of society, and they'll be blamed for things that are otherwise just ineffable," end quote. Kanye is the most recent manifestation of that resentment of and paranoid fantasies about the Jews. One thing we know for certain, he won't be the last. That was from Canary Mission, a Jewish organization that tracks hate. In an article from the Anti-Defamation League called "Unpacking Kanye West's Anti-Semitic Remarks," it says the following. He continues to double down on his anti-Semitic rhetoric. For a deep dive on Ye's latest anti-Semitic remarks, the tropes he continues to amplify, and his history of espousing conspiratorial views, there's an article called Kanye West, What You Need to Know. It starts, Ye continues to amplify anti-Semitic tropes and conspiracy theories. During an interview on Revolt TV's Drink Champs series that was posted on and then removed on October 16, he repeatedly blamed Jewish media and Jewish Zionists for numerous alleged misdeeds, stating that Jewish people have owned the black voice and that the Jewish community, especially in the music industry, they'll take us and milk us until we die. Referencing Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan, who also commented what he was me tooing the Jewish culture. I'm saying you all gotta stand up and admit to what you've been doing. He doubled down on anti-Semitism during an October 17 interview with Chris Cuomo on News Nation, criticizing the so-called Jewish underground media mafia and alleging that every celebrity has a Jewish people in their contract. He also claimed that his life was threatened by his Jewish managers, lawyers, and accountant due to his political beliefs. On both Drink Champs and Cuomo, he repeated his previous defense that black people cannot be anti-Semitic, stating, quote, "We are a Semite, we Jew, so I can't be anti-Semite," end quote. He comments to have been embraced by anti-Semitic extremist groups. During an October 16 sermon for the Nation of Islam's annual Holy Day of Atonement commemoration, student minister Ismail Mohammed referenced Yee's recent remarks. Extreme black Hebrew Israelite sects also praised Yee over the weekend for helping spread the teachings to more people. Other extremist groups, including White Lives Matter and the Goyim Defense League, have leveraged Yee's comments to further their own agendas and inspire new propaganda campaigns. Yee, formerly known as Kanye West, has recently used his media presence and social influence to espouse anti-Semitic tropes about the Jewish intimidation, power, and control. On October 6, he joined Fox News' Tucker Carlson. His decision to wear a White Lives Matter t-shirt at a Paris Fashion Week garnered heightened media attention. During the interview, some of which was not aired on Fox that evening, Ye made a series of offensive and conspiratorial claims about Jewish people and Jewish identity. He claimed that Jews are actually black people, saying that when he refers to Jews, he means the 12 lost tribes of Judah, the blood of Christ, who the people know as the race black really are, and posited that Planned Parenthood was proud of a collaboration with the KKK and Margaret Sanger to control the Jew, i.e. black population. He also said that it is impossible for him to fairly describe anti-Semitic as a black person. He is actually a Jew. He also told Carlson that he believed Jared Kushner only arranged peace agreements between Arab nations and Israel to make money, and at another point, he stated that he wished his children had learned about Hanukkah instead of complicated Kwanzaa, because Hanukkah would at least come with some financial engineering. The next day, he shared screenshots of text messages on Instagram insinuating that Jews are using their purported control over his peers in the music industry to intimidate him, and defiantly said that no one can threaten or influence me. The post has since been deleted. He also said that the Jewish people toyed with him and that they tried to blackball anyone who opposes their agenda. This tweet, in which he ominously referred to going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people, raised the specter of violence, was later removed by Twitter. While Ye has not been a stranger to controversy and anti-Semitism in recent years, his dangerous rhetoric may help advance the spread of existing false and anti-Semitic narratives shared by extremist groups. There is no evidence that Ye views himself as a member of an organized extremist group, but his recent remarks are reminiscent of popular tropes exposed by anti-Semites, including the claim that black people are Jews and cannot be anti-Semitic. The belief that black people rather than Jewish people today are the true descendants of biblical Israelites is common among followers of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement. Their adherents who reject Judaism and are not the same as black Jews or Jews of color refer to themselves as true Jews to emphasize the distinction. This belief implicitly calls into question whether modern Jews, or whom only a minority of people of color, have any historical relationship with the ancient Israelites described in the Bible. Some black Hebrew Israelite sects are openly anti-Semitic and extremist. and adherents state explicitly that members of the mainstream Jewish community are imposters or fake Jews, who have used trickery and other nefarious tactics to convince the world that they are the legitimate children of Israel and to steal the religious heritage of black people. Many proponents of this fake Jews narrative believe that modern Jews are part of a global conspiracy to oppress non-Jews. The defense that Ye provides for his own anti-Semitic remarks, he cannot be anti-Semitic because he's black, is also highly reminiscent of ideas espoused by both black Hebrew Israelite adherents and members of Nation of Islam, the largest black nationalist organization in the country with a long history of anti-Semitism and bigotry. Because if you view black people as Semitic, they believe that they inherently cannot be anti-Semitic. Ye's claim that Planned Parenthood was created as part of an effort to control or harm the black/Jew population has also been promoted by anti-Semites and bears resemblance to the other existing conspiracy theories about Planned Parenthood. The Nation of Islam, for example, regularly promotes the belief that the U.S. government and Jewish people have collaborated on a depopulation agenda against black people. The NOI has specifically criticized both Sanger and Planned Parenthood for their alleged role in the so-called agenda. Ye also invoked the anti-Semitic belief that Jewish people are disproportionately powerful and that they control the media, including the music industry. This trope has been presented in discourse of other black performers, activists in the past, and is a common talking point with extremist groups, and evidenced by narratives promoted by the Nation of Islam. This trope is not unique to Nation of Islam, but it has been repeatedly promoted by its notorious anti-Semitic leader, Louis Farrakhan. Among Farrakhan's most frequent anti-Semitic claims during the 40-year tenure as their leader is the accusation that Jewish people control the entertainment industry, especially rap and hip-hop artists, and use that purported control to exploit black artists and promote immoral, harmful behavior to black people, which he regularly mentions in his speeches. Nation of Islam's Final Call newspaper has also published a number of articles over the years highlighting the alleged iron grip that Jewish businessmen have on our most popular and talented black artists, and defending Ye for standing up as so-called Jewish power. Ye's claim that Jared Kushner's action between Israel and Arab nations was driven by his desired financial gain corroborates long-standing anti-Semitic tropes about alleged Jewish control of money and financial institutions. His vague suggestion that a prominent Jewish holiday is associated with financial engineering also reinforces the stereotype. Overall, Ye's suggestions about Jewish people, holidays, monetary implication that too lends credence to the baseless idea that Jews can leverage their power for insidious purposes because of their stronghold they have on financial institutions. Ye has made statements about Jewish power in the past, including remarks in 2013 alleging that Jewish people are more well-connected than black people and therefore have an unfair advantage. They were denounced by the Anti-Defamation League and later defended by Farrakhan, who stated that Ye told the truth and said nothing wrong. During a concert shortly after 2013 controversy, Ye reportedly stated, "Talked to Farrakhan the other night. He told me not to apologize. I ain't gonna apologize." Ye and Farrakhan have expressed mutual respect and support for one another on other occasions, as well as 2005. Ye visited their headquarters at Mosque Miriam in Chicago to publicly express support for the group's Million More movement. Ye's 2015 song All Day includes lyrics which describe Farrakhan as sensei. Also in 2015, Ye attended an event Farrakhan held in Los Angeles. Farrakhan defended Ye's again in 2018. The latter had drawn criticism from political stances. After Ye's most recent remarks, prominent conspiracy theories, extremist groups, and anti-Semitic influencers were quickly to leverage his words to both express support and promote their own beliefs. A Twitter account that appears to belong to a conspiratorial and anti-Semitic Nation of Islam social influencer, Risa Islam, posted, "The same ones who terminated Kanye West from Twitter are the same ones who are involved in the enslavement of our people, going to argue they owe black people reparations for the evils they have done to our ancestors." Risa Islam has previously promoted the claim that black people cannot be anti-Semitic because they're the true Jews or true Hebrews. During an appearance on the Hip Hop News Uncensored podcast, Nation of Islam Executive Council member and Student Minister Wesley Muhammad stated that Kanye West is speaking a lot of truth right now and he's triggering a very dangerous enemy. I see him with good reason threatening to go DEFCON 3 on Jewish executives of Hollywood. Jewish executives of Hollywood are those who are the Wizard of Oz responsible for the carnage that has become hip-hop and has become Black life as a result of commandeering of hip-hop. In a separate episode of the same podcast, Nuri Muhammad also defended Ye, stating that black people are the real Semites. So to be anti-Semitic means to be anti-yourself. The thing that happened is they used this term as a way of muscling and shutting people and putting you really into a social prison by which you will never have a platform to express yourself. During a live stream on October 10, leaders of the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge, extremist Black Hebrew Israelite sect, defended Ye and tied his comments to the group's teachings about black people being the true Jews. Members of the Kansas City chapter of Israel United in Christ, another extremist Black Hebrew Israelite sect, also reacted to Ye's comments during a live stream, rejecting the widespread accusation that the statements were anti-Semitic. These Ashkenazi Jews or Ashkenazi Edomites, they're not Jews. They're not Jews. You understand? So then you say, Ye is anti-Semitic. He's Semitic. End quote. The reason that evangelicals support Ye is because he's been saying that his ex-wife, Kim Kardashian, is a Satanist, and that he is fighting the true fight against her and the other demonic forces. So we see how anti-Semitism can be spread very quickly because people have already been warmed up to these ideas through conspiratorial thinking. So we have to be aware of this and careful not to allow this to permeate our culture and our society. In this week's show, Brian Dunning returns to discuss fascinating topics like he did in his last interview with us. The founder of the website Skeptoid, Critical Analysis of Pop Phenomena, Brian has a number of post and audio recordings about different subjects such as pseudoscience, urban myths, consumer affairs, and health fads. The topic we are discussing today is the vast number of false flag conspiracy theories out there. Can you define what a false flag theory is for us, Brian?
Sure. A false flag operation, first, hello everyone. Second, a false flag operation is when the government stages something to make it look like it was done by a disgruntled citizen. For example, a very popular one these days is the Sandy Hook conspiracy theory. Sandy Hook was a school where a person went in and shot a bunch of students, and the Sandy Hook conspiracy theorists believe that this was a false flag operation where the U.S. government actually sent a shooter in here and killed all the people, trying to make it look like it was done by a person. That's the basic idea.
Some people say, well, when there's a mass shooting, we need to look at the mental health problems that person had, or we need to look at the policies that allow them to get the guns, or we need to look at better security wherever they're at. So there's a lot of other things related to that. But going back to false flag conspiracies, didn't the Nazis and the Russian army actually perform some false flag things to get the war going during those time periods?
Intelligence agencies are doing them all the time, especially during warfare, not actually doing things and creating stories about things, horrible things being done. Propaganda to make it look like the enemy is much worse than they are.
As I was doing research for the show, I found something that said that right before World War II and the invasion of Poland by the Nazis, they took a bunch of prisoners, dressed them up as Nazi soldiers or German soldiers, and had the Gestapo shoot at them, pretending to be the Polish army, and then they used that to use it as an excuse to invade Poland. Have you heard about that one?
I hadn't heard that specific story, but it wouldn't surprise me if something like that happened. You know, wartime is different from peacetime. A lot goes on in wartime because there's easy cover, which is an active shooting war going on. In peacetime, it's not so easy to cover up a false flag operation, and they don't really happen to any meaningful degree. I hadn't heard that particular story, but I wouldn't be surprised to learn that that it's true. I also wouldn't be surprised to learn that it was false propaganda.
There's also a story about how during the, missile crisis and the conflict with Cuba, that there was an operative in the U.S. government that wanted to do false flag conflicts and to justify invading Cuba, and that President JFK turned him down. And the only way we found out about that was after his assassination, they started digging and they found it. And then, it looked good on JFK that he wasn't willing to steep that low to start a war with Cuba. When we start uncovering those type of things, people wonder, well, if they were willing to do it back then, what would stop the U.S. government to do it now?
Well, yeah, and that sounds superficially like a fine argument in favor of, hey, false flag things must be happening every day. But the fact that someone discussed it and planned it but didn't carry it out is very different from saying that it is happening currently. There's people are always talking about and planning things. That happens every day. Heck, I've thought about, gee, how would I rob this bank if I was inclined to do so? And that's very different from it actually happening in the real world and people being able to get away with it. So I would caution people who look at stories of plans being discovered or it being discovered that it would have been in someone's best interest for this to happen, et cetera, et cetera. I would caution people from using that as evidence that it probably is actively happening today, because that's a huge difference.
So then, the logical follow-up for me is that if you believe that the country you live in, the leaders that you elected, and the people that you surround yourself with are capable of supporting this, allowing it to happen, turning the other way, or whatever else, for all these horrible things to keep happening, how can you live with yourself? How can you be part of society if you feel that people are capable of horrendous, evil things? And when I was discussing this with a friend, he said, well, it's not that people are evil, but they're misguided. But I think that if they are planning 9/11 and all kinds of horrible things, why participate or be involved or be around to see all that happen right before your eyes?
Well, I think that's a great point. And let me pose a hypothetical situation. What if the government sent some military unit to your town and rounded up 3,000 people from your town and executed them in the town square with machine guns? Completely innocent people, and just did this in plain view, and there was no secret that it happened. Do you think it would be reasonable for you and anyone else or anyone else in town to immediately take up arms against that government force? Serious question. I mean, would you expect to see that happen? Well, okay, let's say that the 3,000 people that they rounded up included your family, and you see them being dragged away, put into this ring, and have machine guns opened up on them. Wouldn't you feel compelled, gee, maybe I'd better go get my shotgun and see if I can, protect my family? It's going to happen. It would happen. People would openly rise up against that force to some degree or other. And you're right, it would be terribly bloody and horrible. But, so I point this back to the people who believe 9/11 was a false flag operation carried out by the United States government. If the United States government murdered 3,000 people right there in plain view in front of everyone, then why aren't you right now taking up arms and attacking the government? Because you can't have it both ways. If the government is actively killing Americans, you should be actively fighting against that government, and not just voting against them, but actively taking up arms against them, because it's now a matter of immediate life and death.
See, but this is where, this is a show that plays on the air in a big city. And the reason that we're discussing this very controversial subject is because it's fun to see Patrick Swayze do that in movies from the 80s. It's a lot of verbiage to go around saying that there's a one world government and everybody's taking over. But I'm talking about the ramifications of these ideas. And like you just mentioned, there are people who believe this kind of stuff and they follow through with it. So our job as communicators and as rational people is to point to the fallacies of these arguments and to bring people back to reality that if things were that bad, the whole country would collapse and there would be ongoing conflict. So for people to sit back behind their computers and start making all kinds of allegations, that's in the comfort of their homes. People from other countries don't have the energy to be coming up with conspiracy theories because they're worried about feeding their families. So is there like this type of privilege of living in a first world country where we can come up with all kinds of crazy ideas and not be accountable to society?
Yeah. And when we live in such comfort and have so many of our problems taken care of by the fact that we live in this great first world country and luxuries are affordable and nobody goes hungry and things are generally great, we tend to invent enemies. We tend to invent problems. That's one reason why there is a lot of belief in conspiracy theories among first world countries and much less among third world countries, because they have real concrete problems to worry about. What you're describing is also the logical next step in the scenario I was just proposing, that if the government's out there killing people, then someone would be rising up against the government. And the fact that we don't see that happening is pretty good evidence that that's not what happened. A lot of people don't necessarily believe that. I think the people who are saying 9/11 was a false flag, their statement is largely motivated not by actual belief, but by this the whole structure of reasons that conspiracy theories are popular. And we just talked about one, because you're otherwise comfortable, you have to invent enemies, and that's an easy way to do it. And then there's the philosophy behind conspiratorial belief that we discussed last time. What we see of conspiracy theory belief in the United States is much more consistent with a world where these conspiracies are not actually happening.
At the same time, I believe that putting your attention on all these secret rooms and secret people and those type of conspiracies takes away from the real problems and the real issues that I believe us as human beings should get involved in, like poverty and abuse and real war and real conflict. So do you think that is a type of paranoia also? Like, we've seen politicians use the paranoia for the purposes, but is there something also in not being able to get a hold of life and what's going on and start shooting crazy ideas everywhere to kind of see what sticks or what actually takes hold in people's minds as part of this?
Well, I don't know that that conspiratorial thinking takes away from charitable work that might otherwise be taking place. You know, it's still a fringy thing, and a lot of people, more people than you think, have some belief in conspiracy theories, but it's not something they take actively that governs how they go through their day. A lot of people will say something like, oh yeah, I think the drug companies are probably withholding the cure for cancer, but it's not going to affect the way they go through their day or the decisions they make in their daily life. I don't necessarily think that it has much of an impact on the domestic gross product or anything like that. I don't know. I'm probably not answering your question very well. But
let's get back to 9/11. So on your website, I saw you debating people that talk about, can metal really melt at those temperatures? And they go back and they say, well, you know, how do you know? And they use, I guess what you would say, fallacious or arguments.
Fallacious logic.
Yeah, so we talked last time about how there's a point where you can't really use logic with certain people. For the rest of us, what are the things that we know of that point to it being what it was, an attack from a foreign terrorist group, and that it happened, the collapse of the towers and all that was a natural ramification of the planes going in?
Talk about the temperature at which steel melts and all of this stuff. What you're doing is you're focusing on tiny details and ignoring the gigantic obvious details, because the gigantic obvious details do not support the idea that this was a secret government conspiracy theory. So people tend to focus on little tiny details and look for little strange inconsistencies and things like that. Probably all have explanations, but they're ignoring the giant questions, and the giant questions are what I think people should be focusing on. For example, the fact that bin Laden freely admitted that he planned this, and we have every shred of evidence. We know everything that happened leading up to the planning and the financing and who did it and who was where, and it was completely consistent with what that group's political motivations were. Everything that happened literally on camera as everyone in the world was watching it. It's kind of hard to ignore those details. And so the conspiracy theorists, the people who are just ideologically motivated to find something wrong with this narrative, they have to ignore everything that was obvious, and they have to dig down and look at this. What temperature does this particular metal melt at? And what kind of chemical signature would this particular explosive leave? Things like this that are just, it's just silly. It's a waste of your time. It's like, they're always telling us, wake up, sheeple. I just want to slap some of these guys and say, would you open your eyes a little bit and, smell the roses of what happened on that day?
But to our audience, we're trying to find like alternatives to the alternatives. So,
well, okay, but I'm not going to encourage people to read up on what temperature steel melts when it's in a fire fueled by jet fuel, because that's missing the point. That's ignoring the big evidence and going after the tiny, insignificant minutia evidence.
But the overall issue that I have with this and other conspiracies, and this show was prompted from a post on Facebook where it was pretty much saying that everything was a false flag. Like you said, Sandy Hook, then 9/11, and they started going down, shooting, like all kinds of things that have been happening in the news was a false flag. And I knew it was a bunk post because it was kind of like, it's kind of like the thing where you believe something and you go backtrack and try to make it fit to your theory. So that's my problem with false flag conspiracies. But the heart of the matter for me is, again, if there are people orchestrating this and there's this fear that it's all secretive, what about the real terror groups, like you said with Bin Laden and groups like that, where they're very open about wanting to hurt innocent victims and wanting to use terror to affect the reactions of different governments and stuff like that. To me, that's something that, like you said, is out in the open. So why go looking for things that are hidden when, like most conspiracy theories that we've spoken about, the reason that there is no evidence for the conspiracy is because it's hidden, and that there's a vast group of people trying to keep it hidden. So again, how do we get people to start thinking about the problematic nature of those type of claims?
You mentioned the thought process that conspiracy theorists, when they have a preferred explanation of false flag attack, and when I say they have a preferred explanation, that means exactly what it sounds as. They want these things to be false flags. They look at the Gulf of Tonkin from the Vietnam War in the 1960s. They look at things in history that they want to be false flag attacks because this appeals to them at a deeply organic level. They start from the preferred explanation and they work backwards trying to collect little bits of evidence that they feel supports that. If you work forwards, if you were to say, hey, what happened at the Gulf of Tonkin, and you look at the historical record and you see what was known when, and you read all the different sources, who knew what and when did they know it and what was determined and what happened, there's no way you're going to do real research like that and conclude, oh, it was a false flag attack. You're going to find out what actually happened if you do real research. The only way that you can conclude a conspiracy theory was some false flag attack is if you do the scientific method exactly backwards and start from your preferred conclusion and work backwards looking to support it.
I know it's a little bit off topic, but have you done any reports on the Illuminati and the obsession with that? Because I'm tired every time that a famous person dies, they were Illuminati and the Illuminati got them. It just keeps going.
In the 520-something episodes I've done of my show, I've not yet done an episode specifically on the Illuminati. I've mentioned them at least 100 times. And the reason I haven't is because it's such a vague claim. If you talk about the Bilderberg group, well, let me give just a quick 30-second description of the Bilderbergers. This is a group of guys from a certain group of Western Bloc countries who, for I think about 40 years now, 40 or 50 years since the Cold War started, they've been having an annual meeting. There's a core group of a number of people, and then they invite most of the conference attendees each year, invited leaders from industry, business, military, government, entertainment, arts. And so they since this is a group of powerful people who meet once a year, it's a private meeting. It's a private conference. You know, you don't get invited, you don't pay, you don't get to go. So for some reason, people have decided that, this is probably the New World Order planning global domination. So there's a whole lot of conspiracy theories about the Bilderbergers, as they're called. Now, the Bilderbergers are something that's definable and that's known. You know, they've got a website. You can see a list of who attends, the conference topics that are being presented and everything. Conversely, the Illuminati are extremely vague. There is no such group that you can point to. You can't say, the Illuminati meet once a year in Switzerland or something like that. It's just kind of stories and vague mentions of these mysterious people who somehow control the world. So I've never really been able to do an episode of my podcast about the Illuminati just because there's not enough that's specific to talk about.
Well, the same blog that got me going with the last show that we did together about how the Jews were trying to take over the world, they could replace the Jews with the Illuminati or with the American government. I even saw one where they were saying that the Catholic Jesuits and the Jews were working together with the Masons. And it's like groups that don't like each other are supposed to be preparing the one world government. Do you think any of it has to do with this apocalyptic worldview that some religious groups have, and they're trying to pin the tail on the Antichrist and his followers?
Yeah, but not in every case. You know, it's different for pretty much every conspiracy theorist brings his own unique angle and his own reasons and his own history behind his thought process that led him to believe his particular version of these events.
Put your process of thinking to the test. So if you're using the scientific method, I heard a professor a couple of weeks ago talk about how, we do alternative history in our show, and when I heard this, I was shocked, and I wanted to do some research about it, so help me work through this. So he says that the U.S. was founded around the same time that slavery was abolished in England, and he connected that as saying that one of the reasons that the founding fathers broke away from England was because they wanted to keep slavery going. So how would I test his theory? Like, where would I go to see if that's true or not?
Well, I think you would go, and I don't know, that's not something I've never looked into. It doesn't sound familiar, so it's kind of new to me, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. What I would do is I would go through all of the publications from the Founding Fathers' days, things like the Federalist Papers, not just the Constitution, but the many larger volumes of searchable text that exist from those early days, and start searching for keywords and see if indeed that was any part of their thought process, because you can believe they would have written about it. My expectation is that you'll probably find something, because if there is a belief like that, it was probably started from some grain of truth. So you'll probably find that someone did mention the ending of slavery in England as a reason to come to the colonies. But I don't know. That would be an interesting project.
You can go and say that the Masons had something to do with slavery in Europe or with the Egyptians and this and that. So that's the thing. You and I talked about how there might be a kernel of truth in a lot of these ideas, and then it develops into something else, and there's always an agenda, and there's always either political or ideological thing to push. But in a world of freedom of speech, we talked already about that ideas have consequences, but what would you like to see out in the real world when it comes down to those things being put out there? Is the job of journalists and thinkers to question these ideas, or is it just like sci-fi writing where people can just go on all kinds of rabbit trails? What is the response that we should have to these type of conspiracy theories?
That's a really interesting question, because I don't necessarily immediately agree with the premise that something should be done about them. We live in a freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of ideas. As far as them being taught as if they are real history, then that comes down to educational standards. And I think we probably have, certainly an imperfect but a better-than-nothing system in place for handling that. You know, anytime somebody tries to become the gatekeeper for ideas, that's very treacherous ground. It's really problematic because clearly no one's going to agree with everything. And any two people who have conflicting belief systems, and one of them is set up to be the gatekeeper for ideas, you're going to have conflict right away. I think the best way to fight misinformation is with better information, and not necessarily trying to ban it or silence it or anything like that. I mean, I get accused on my podcast all the time of not giving a voice to the alternate belief system or of being some sort of a censor, as if somehow my putting out information affects their ability to put out misinformation. It doesn't at all. You know, more information, more good information, better science communication, more entertaining science communication. The TV networks have learned some time ago that it's really easy to be sensationalist and to get lots of eyeball share if they completely discard what's real and simply make up whatever sounds amazing. I think that's really unfortunate, but I also think they have every right to do that. And what I always work toward, and what a lot of my colleagues are always working toward, is trying to come up with good ideas for TV programs that are just as sensational and just as amazing and just as exciting and therefore just as commercial that people will want to broadcast, but that focus on good information. And that's not necessarily easy. So, you know, the people who promote rationality are always going to have an uphill battle because we're constrained by what's true, and our opponents in promoting misinformation have no such constraints. So it's always going to be an uphill battle, and I don't anticipate going out of business anytime soon.
I'm just very troubled with the 9/11 thing. Like, as much as I want to dismiss it and say, okay, well, there's just a couple of kooks out there who are trying to pin it on the government. Looking at the overall picture and not focusing on the minutia related to it, what would be the strongest case to get people away from thinking that it was an inside job?
Directly confronting their cherished belief is only going to produce conflict and argument, and it's not going to persuade anyone because they did not arrive at their position through a rational analysis of the evidence. So there's no use giving them that. What I suggest instead is to find common ground, and by that I would suggest finding some topic that you can both agree on that is another science versus pseudoscience question, or history versus pseudo-history question, or economics versus pseudo-economics question, something where you can both agree. I've had that response more than any other from listeners to my show who say, I used to be a 9/11 conspiracy theorist until I started listening to Skeptoid, and I really enjoyed it, and then gradually I changed my views.